Hello, hello. This is Earth Sky Woman Tammy Brunk, and I'm here with you today to just speak into a little bit of the medicine of this much acclaimed blood moon, total lunar eclipse in Virgo, super full moon that we have in Thursday, Friday morning, March 14th, where the totality is going to be right at about 2 a.m. Central, and the entire spectacle can be observed or can be worked with ceremonially from about midnight to about 4 a.m. Central Time. And this eclipse is going to be visible. It's going to be sweeping through the Americas and Western Europe, Africa, and the Pacific region. So it's going to be visible to about 40% of the world, at least in part. And so this is really a pretty massive event that we're going through. And of course, it's opening a 2 week, the most concentrated eclipse season or window. It's opening that 2 week window that's going to ostensibly close in greatest intensity with a partial solar eclipse on March 29th, and that's an Aries partial solar eclipse. Okay, so this, I wanted to just speak into just first of all, what is a lunar eclipse? What is a total lunar eclipse? And so anytime you've got a new moon or a full moon, and again, a lunar eclipse is a super full moon, a solar eclipse is a super new moon. So anytime you have a new moon or a full moon, what's involved is the lining up of the sun, the earth, the moon. They're coming together. Either the sun and the moon are in a conjunction, so they're lined up with the earth too, or that's a new moon, or the sun and the moon are opposite one another. That's a full moon. And so usually the moon isn't exactly lined up because it kind of moves like a snake in its relationship to between the earth and the sun. And so it's moving, it's not usually above or below the alignment of the sun and the earth. Um, but when you have an eclipse, what that means is it's like a lock and a key. It's like, when you have those, you've got to like try to open a lock and you've got to get everything lined up perfectly before it opens. That's how it works with the eclipses, where almost precisely or precisely these three planetary bodies are lined up almost exactly in perfect alignment. And so if it's a total solar or lunar eclipse, then they're exactly lined up, right? But if it's partial, then they're almost exactly lined up, if that makes sense. So a lunar eclipse is where you have what's going to happen visibly in the sky is you start out with a bright full moon, and then the full moon gets there's like little bites taken out of it, right? Like Pac-Man with the shadow of the earth that's kind of covering the face of the moon. And then so you're starting out with a bright full moon, and then by the end it's dark. And then once again the light comes and it's kind of, you see the little crescent moon and it's bigger, 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 bigger. It's a little different than what it looks like. Well, okay. So basically what's happening is that in some sense, what usually happens in about 29 and a half days, where the moon will go from new to, crescent, and then all the phases all the way to full, and then back to smaller, 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 and then all the way back to new. I just saw a little mouse. That was cute. And mice do have a connection to the moon and the lunar cycles. But so what's going to happen usually in a month happens over the course of, in this case, about 4 hours. So we could say that this is kind of compressing time. And so one of the ways I've seen this is that wherever the sun and the moon are located in the sky over that period of time, we get to experience, in a very compressed way, that energy, that medicine. And we get to really focus our attention on, and it's the shadow activation, right? So we get to be a vessel, we get to participate in the often emotional healing or clearing or transmutation or alchemy around whatever the themes are that are arising with this eclipse or full moon. And okay. So then we get to ask, what's the shadow work we get to do? What's the alchemizing? What's the healing? What's the emotional release? The transformation that is invited. And so then we get to look at what's this polarity of Virgo and Pisces. And so there were a couple of themes that were coming through for me. And the first one was, interestingly, it was integrating God inside and outside. That was kind of the phrase, integrating God inside and outside. So those of you who follow my work know that I love to tell stories as a way of kind of getting to a bit of the nonlinear wisdom in a human way. And so I was just remembering the other day a dream that I had had during COVID, I think it was. And this dream featured a beloved colleague of mine, an elder who was a priestess for many, many years. And, she feels very priestess to me, like the highest expression of the priestess. This dream involved her. It also involved another priestess who was part of this larger priestess community, also an elder. And it just so happened that at this, I'll tell you what happened in the dream. In the dream, the one of the women, one of these priestesses, was up like at the front of the room or at a pulpit or something, and she was singing about how much she loves God, how much she loves God. And this other priestess, who was really the woman that I've worked more closely with, I'm closer to as a colleague, she was basically kind of shutting it down, like kind of trying to distract, trying to kind of shift the energy. She clearly wasn't comfortable with it. And, so that was the energy in the dream. There was a priestess who was, I love God, and another priestess who was like, oh, that's not okay. And it was very interesting in a practical way because one of these priestesses was actually going through her own kind of rite of passage, her own experience during 2020, where she was literally seeing the world in a very different way. And she was, the beliefs, the stories, whatever that she was believing and seeing was very different than what the original training of these priestess mysteries had been. So much so that in a sense, she actually literally, I think, became a Christian, a practicing Christian. And in a sense, she's not like fully denouncing her past, but this kinds of thing will happen. And so it was very interesting in the dream because when I woke up from the dream, I had this sense kind of some sadness because as much as I had some discomfort about what was happening with this individual priestess, because I think both of us, my colleague, my closer colleague, and I myself, there were a lot of things that we resonated with around what was happening in 2020. We all had some similar beliefs and perspectives in what was going on, and yet there was a certain line that was kind of crossed into certain belief systems that felt a little um, crossing beyond the perspectives that I was trained in as through some of these mysteries and that my colleague was trained in. But in the dream, and when I woke up from the dream, there was just a part of me that is really the oracle, that I think really is the goddess from my lens, who is more encompassing. And she or this or spirit, whatever it was that I was tuning into, was there was a sense around a sadness because it's like there doesn't need to be a conflict here. There doesn't need to be a conflict. There's room for all of it. There really is room for all of it. But also, I remember just deeply dropping into the dream and acknowledging and recognizing that so much of what is unfolded in the last 5,500 years has been war culture between the deeper sacred feminine mysteries, the more earth-based feminine mysteries, the priestess mysteries, and the way that Christianity has currently evolved, especially the evangelical kinds of movements around that. So there has been a sense of clearly, obviously, there's a lot of wounding there. There's a lot of misunderstanding there. There's um, a lot of hurt, a lot of ancestral ancient hurt in those fields. There's a lot there, right? So this matters right now. This matters in terms of what's going on in our political realm, what's going on in 3D reality here in the US. Um, what's playing out has to do with that bifurcation. People talk about bifurcation. That's part of the bifurcation. So I was seeing where actually that is one of the expressions of Virgo Pisces, when those two signs are in disharmony. when they are battling it out, this is one way it shows up. There's Virgo on the one hand, who is the ceremonial priestess, who is very oriented to Gaia, to the living earth, to earth systems, to the sacred feminine, who is sovereign, who is whole, who is not here to, she exists as a divine sacred being, whether or not she is in a pair bond, whether or not she is belongs to a traditional religious faith. Um, from that perspective, Virgo is in deep devotion to Mother Earth and to the feminine principle and to this living creation, right? That's Virgo. And then you have, on the other hand, Pisces. And Pisces has been, we could say, co-opted by, or we could say Pisces has much more of an orientation to unity, to oneness, to the places where we all connect. You know, it's like love and light. You know, on some level, when we say you'll talk to somebody who has had a near-death experience, and they will try to talk about the immense love that is God, that is spirit, that is what we return to. It's numinous, it's unspeakable, it is, it feels beyond this realm of the earth, right? So there's the Pisces way that we are, you know, it's kind of like it's all the same. You know, God is one. There's this love of God, ecstatic communion with God that is mystical and yet also can at times verge into um, a sometimes a negation of the particulars of what's happening on the physical material realm. And so, you know, in a very but in one way, what I want to say about it is that I've seen this also playing out interestingly more recently with many women who had been very deeply immersed in the Magdalene mysteries and in the priestess mysteries in many ways, now moving. I mean, of course, it's not a big leap, right? Because the Magdalene mysteries have such a deep connection to Yeshua, to Jesus Christ in a particular field of wisdom that, you know, many would say roots back down to the Essenes or the Nazarenes or the original sacred societies or communities from whom Jesus, Yeshua, the spiritual traditions that he emerged from, right? So some would say that. So this isn't a huge leap that when you're working with the Gaia Sophia, when you're working with the Mary mysteries, when you're working with the deeper roots of Christianity in the way that there's been an explosion of this. And, you know, and from my lineage, when I learned recently that in my family, on my mother's side, there was a line, an unbroken line of 12 women with the name of Magdalene, Mary Magdalene. So, you know, many of us have a connection to those lineages who are drawn to the feminine divine, as I have been with the work with Venus and in other realms with Seven Sisters and working with women for so long. You know, I do have this miracle medal, the feminine divine, that I work color pink, right? Here it is, that I talked about in the last video. And so it's not a stretch that when you work with the feminine mysteries, that you come into contact with Yeshua, with the Christ and the living Christian tradition. You know, it's all there. It's all there. And there has been a lot of distrust and there's been a lot of fear, for good reason, of the proselytizing of the evangelical aspect of Christianity, right? So, so what I've been feeling is it's integrating God inside and outside. So I've been listening, for example, to a woman, Lori Ladd, who I really like her work sometimes, and she has these YouTubes, and she has written a book on the origins of humanity, and this whole all the galactic stuff that's been up, you know, like who we are as a species and all these things. So that's been her work for a long time. And now all of a sudden for her, it's really all about Yeshua, following Yeshua, and Yeshua being a pathway that's much more simplified to connect to God, right? This is what she's speaking to. She's very careful. She does, and it's interesting because when she's talking to Jesus, I think 2 years ago, she started really feeling Jesus, started working with Jesus, not in a religious sense, but as an essence, as an energy, and also as, you know, a presence of an enlightened human, right? she started being in deep devotion to Yeshua, to Jesus. But she said when she is in a situation where she really wants to call and support, she'll say Jesus Christ, right? Because there's a lot of power behind those words. But I notice when she's actually putting out a course, it's about walking with Yeshua. And the reason she does that is because she knows that if she says Jesus Christ, then all of a sudden she's going to be lumped into a field of energy that for many of us has felt very repellent because it feels proselytizing. It feels like it's telling us we're going to go to hell if we don't think just this way. We all know, right? Those of us on this side know. um, However, I think when she is tuning into this energy, it feels accurate to many of us. And I feel this inside of myself in my own internal struggle, where often I can see where on the Virgo end of things, that can be the ritualistic or the ceremonial aspect of my life, where I can go into a kind of maybe not as accurate or not maybe a distorted version of ritual or ceremony where I'm going into a perfectionistic mode of I've got to do it just this way. And if I screw up this little thing, then I did it wrong. It's like it's a Saturnization. It's where Saturn comes in and is I mean distorted Saturn and kind of you should do this, you shouldn't do that. It's very it has a patriarchal tone, right? A perfectionistic tone. That's shadow Virgo. And so it's like I can only know God or I can only connect to spirit if I do it with this precise procedure. I open my chakras in just this way. I do yoga every day for 3 hours, whatever it is. It's very precise kind of you would have to be a renunciate. You would have to be in a completely separated from physical 3D reality in order to accomplish those spiritual tasks, right? That can be shadow Virgo, very perfectionistic and having to, channel the divine in this impeccable way. And so there's that end of things where I can see that sometimes, and that's what Lori's talking about, is she's like, I've done that thing, I've done it, I'm over it. And now it's just, I want to be with God. I want to worship God, and Yeshua helps me do that. So I really get it, right? And that there needs to be a simplification of how we root into the living reality of the Christ, of God consciousness. So, Pisces can take us there. Pisces has the medicine to take us there. And the North Node is in Pisces right now. So, meaning that the general emphasis, the movement of humanity, our collective destiny right now is Pisces. So it is kind of dissolving those places where we think we have to be perfect, we have to do it just right, we have to be so um, precise, and our spiritual procedures have to be on point in order for us to achieve enlightenment. Pisces kind of dissolves that in a way. Devotion is key. It is about devotion. It is about prayer. It is about, um, I say that meaning it could be everything from actual, prayer, or it could be being in service to your neighbor or in your community, connecting with people in your community who are marginalized, or taking care of the elder on your street, or, it can be service. Pisces can be expressed as unconditional love and service in your community. And so, but in any case, it's more, in an interesting way, it can be more simple, more humble, more, um, like it's not such a big thing to connect to God. It just means the basics, like be kind, love your neighbor, love God, and whatever source God is to you, right? So Pisces can be that on some level. And again, Pisces also can be the part of us that gets caught into what you can see as more of a cult consciousness, meaning that it's those moments where we give all of our power, or we give away our sovereignty and power to a system or another human being or a belief system, and we stop questioning. So like blind faith, right? So there's at one end of the extreme, it's blind faith. At one end of the Virgo extreme, it's like a real rigid, ritualistic kind of way of operating that may or may not have anything to do with how it is that you actually, it might be very down and in and very deep and dark, which is fine, on the balance of things. But you can see where there's all this that's kind of trying to find a home trying to find peacemaking, trying to learn to dance together inside of us. So again, the way I've been feeling this is integrating God inside outside. So how is it that I connect to spirit when I am on the earth, when I'm just really going inward? How is it that I connect to God that is something larger than myself? Um, and it's not just the territory of Virgo and Pisces, but it feels very alive there. And that also, this eclipse has to do with the aspect of this intense 2025 spring that is about letting go, releasing, because the moon is going to be activating, it will have already activated, I'm sorry, it will be activating Neptune, and it will be crossing the 29 Pisces degree, as Neptune will soon be as well. And so this is kind of also can be grief, it can be world weariness, it can be sorrow, it can be when are we going to change? All those energies can be activated when you're getting to the late degrees of Pisces. So it can be many of us might experience a kind of a breaking down or a breaking loose or opening the floodgates for grief when we look around and we see what's happening, and we still have war, we still have so much suffering. And here in the US, I know many of us are feeling this right now because what do we want? We want a country that is in harmony with our neighbors. I mean, hello, like it's biblical. Love your neighbors. Now look what's happening. How is it that we have gotten to this point where we see this playing out around us in a way that the very ugliest, it feels like the very ugliest kinds of domination tactics and separation tactics. So we might feel grief around that. We might be giving that to a larger, this is what I mean by God inside outside, is within certain frames of a more new age or consciousness movement, to even imagine that there is a God outside of us is seen as giving your power away, right? But there are many of us, and within many indigenous traditions, that would say that absolutely there is a larger force, there is a larger power, and that they're both kind of true at once. Like the universe lives inside of me, God is inside of me, and there are larger forces of life that are always present, offering love, support, wisdom, insight, right? So I am of a mind that all the beautiful new science, the quantum science, the work of Rupert Sheldrake and others, the entheogens, like all this wisdom that is helping us recognize our oneness, our connectedness with everything. That's very Pisces. Um, that that doesn't that actually, in its true essence, opens us to awe and wonder, like, oh my gosh, I am, in some sense, I'm tiny because I'm part of the ocean of all of the love that underpins all of reality. Like love is the root of reality, right? That is healthy Pisces. That's what she reminds us. Love is at the foundation of this entire creation and reality. And people touch that when they do certain hallucinogenics. People touch that when they have a near-death experience. People touch that when we go through deep, deep years of devotion, seeking that awakening. So that's that oneness, that unity consciousness. And so there's that, not God, that God is outside, but God is also larger than us, right? And then there's God inside, which can be that, that the kingdom of heaven lives within concept, right? So they don't need to be at war. And I'm not saying it's just Virgo, Pisces. There are other elements that are at play here when I'm speaking to this. But those ways of being want to dance, want to harmonize. And so, I think that considering that the South Node in Virgo has to do with perfectionism and I've got to get it right, and almost like I'm not loved, I'm not part of it, I don't belong, I am cast out of the kingdom, whatever that feeling is, the shadow aspect of Virgo feels that way. The shadow aspect of Virgo can feel like if I don't get it exactly right, and I'm the one responsible, I'm so sovereign that if I don't do the ceremony right, then I'm cast out. That's a bereft feeling. So that's part of what came through. And then also um, for the Mercury, because within just barely less than 24 hours after the eclipse, the maximum totality of the eclipse, Mercury stations retrograde. And uh, like Venus and like Neptune and like Saturn, I've talked about this before, we have, well, Saturn and Neptune are going to be crossing 29 degrees Pisces to 0 Aries. They're going to do that twice this year. That's incredibly powerful. And then we've got Mercury and Venus also like crossing that threshold between 29 Pisces, 0 Aries, the omega alpha point, or the anaretic degree and the creation degree, however you want to say it. I'm calling it the degree of emergence, right? Or the emergent degree is 0 Aries. But these are very powerful portals that these planets are moving through. So when Mercury stations retrograde, it's already past that point once. So it's already in Aries, but it's going to go back to 0 Aries, 29 Pisces, going to go back to 0 Aries again. And so what I'm feeling with that is it's just new mind. Like we need to allow our minds to be completely reconstructed. So this is why for many of us, we are wanting to learn how to decouple from the drama playing out on the world stage right now sufficiently to have the space to dream something new. And again, I feel like I'm wading into these Pisces Virgo waters here as well, where we're all different as far as this goes and what our roles are. And it's for each of us to kind of tune into what our appropriate role is. But one of the examples my second story that I was tuning into was this reminder of a time where I was living in Idaho, and there was, I forget where it was in Idaho, one of the tiny little more progressive enclaves. And there was a Ku Klux Klan group that was marching through that town. And I remember there was a huge uproar in the progressive community about this. But what they ended up doing that was so brilliant was that they basically set up a fund where for every minute that the KKK marched, they were giving money to the ACLU or some other such organization that was very effectively accomplishing precisely what the KKK was proudly um, was promoting. So so in any case, I thought that was very clever. And I think that some people, okay, we're all coming from different angles. So for some of us, it is for us to come from a purely Piscean perspective of no judgment, no judgment. When I say this, I mean, if I see someone, even if I know someone is in the KKK or someone is a white supremacist or is a Proud Boy or whatever that thing is, I am going to be in a rigorous practice of seeing the humanity in that person and wondering and wanting to understand how it is that they have come to this worldview and to this perspective, and assuming as you would with nonviolent communication principles, and assuming from the perspective of a peacemaker that person has an unmet want or need that is being expressed through the ways that they're acting out, right? I would look at Donald Trump that way. I would look at Elon Musk that way. I would look at Kamala Harris that way. I would look at, the Democratic Party that way. I would say, I would try to come into a place almost of neutrality, but assuming the best of everyone and asking, what is the unmet need? What is the unmet want? Instead of getting tangled always into good, bad, right? That would be the desire to cultivate ourselves as peacemakers, because all the other forces around us for so many hundreds and thousands of years, it has felt that in this time of the Kali Yuga, however you want to say it, instead has been fomenting within us that sense of separation. Now, I'm just speaking about one way of being right now. There are also, for example, before I got on, and this is why I have to kind of sometimes do these, I have to do these videos many times over because I'm so aware my words are important and powerful. So, um, So I would just watched a video briefly of my sister who was in Guadalajara, Mexico as part of a community. It was so beautiful. It's their new year, and they were celebrating the new year from the Aztec calendar perspective, or pre-Hispanic perspective from that region. And so they had a beautiful ceremony with these elders and these deeply devoted danzantes, people who dance every week. And my sister is part of this group. And they dance every week and they do ceremony to honor the earth and to honor the traditions and to um, really keep the world in balance. And there are so many ways that many indigenous people do this. This is what they do in ways we don't fully understand that are much more Virgo. It's more of a ceremonial procedure that actually probably balances things in ways we don't understand. And sometimes it is very precise, right? So the modern mind, the modern human may not understand that fully. But she was speaking also about how the beginning of this new year is also opening this whole period where the people in that community, it's kind of like their Earth Day, and they have many collectives within collectives who are accomplishing all these beautiful projects across the city and across the region to care for Mother Earth. Now, we do that here too, right? It's not just that they do it in Mexico, but I'm always struck. I'm struck when I go to Mexico, when I visit my sister, that the tone and the frequency there is the level of devotion and the level of aliveness and connectedness to Mother Earth is it's so different. It's so much more it has a deeper tone, a deeper root. It feels more, you could say, more scorpionic or more Virgoan than sometimes when we get to somewhere where, like a project, for example, it's a different tone where I would talk about Mary, Our Lady of Light, right? Mary, Our Lady of Light in St. Louis, near St. Louis, this sanctuary that has been created by Meg and Mark Berry, who had these visions of Mother Mary coming to them in a certain apparition and asking them to build a sanctuary. There's a tone and a frequency in that site and in those waters, and even with the couple who first, felt Mary and got her messages, that is a very high frequency. It's much more like an Aquarius or a Pisces frequency than what you're going to see with a group of danzantes in Mexico, right? Very different energetics. There's a deep tone and there's a high frequency tone. And those energies are so different that part of what we're trying to learn at this time in the human experiment is how to honor the full spectrum, right? And so part of what that means is that it's a lot like the kind of internal family systems work many people are doing now, or the parts work, where we're trying to learn. And I think this is mother intelligence, this is mother wisdom. We are trying to learn to reparent ourselves. We're trying to learn to honor the full wisdom inside our own bodies, inside our own many ways of being, inside our own ancestral, sometimes warring factions. And so when we can honor within ourselves the part of us that is more this deep, low tone, Virgo, earthy, darker, kind of rich, loamy, fertile soil, but also that sometimes has edges that can feel scary or feel more um it's a different sensation if we can honor that part of ourselves. And we can also honor the part that's more of the high heart. um that's the question. How do we create a space, a field big enough where they're all experienced as frequencies of God, of divine, of the one? And, because what we're seeing play out in the body of the Americas, this great, you could say there's a personification of the Americas who is a sacred being, who is perhaps like many landforms, a goddess. Who is she? Who is the goddess of the Americas? Is she the one who's on one of the Capitol buildings in DC, an indigenous woman? Who is this personification of the feminine who carries all of the wisdom and the beauty of the entire Americas? And she's being bisected right now by our minds and by the need to control. And how is it that we can look at that story, place it over here, and for many of us, it's like, no, that's not the story I want to feed. The story I want to feed is the remembrance of our connectedness, of our unity. We are an organic whole. And we're going to honor all the different frequencies and the beauty of the diversity of all the bioregions and all the different cultures. And it's similar as well to that culture in our biome, right? Like we've got how many different kinds of sacred beings inside of our bodies that have very different functions, very different ways of being. So what I'm talking about is really, it's what's natural, is for us to be in harmony. So, but at this lunar eclipse, we might feel the arising of all those waves of where we haven't felt connected. There's been again, a bifurcation or a separation between that Pisces, Virgo, between that deeper, darker tone and the lighter, higher tone. And the truth is we're all family. We all belong together, but it's the question of how can these two energies dance together? Or, maybe one's over here and maybe one's over there, and that's okay. The organ, the tissue of the organ isn't going to want to be right near the tissue of the lung. It's just, I'm sorry, the tissues of the, like say the spleen or of the brain, or they're different. They have a different function. So they don't all have to get mushed together. But because we are one organ that has all these beautiful, elegantly designed parts, there is the need to honor every part and to begin to celebrate the uniqueness and the difference rather than believing that just because they're different, that somehow they don't belong or they don't belong together. It is about right relationship. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. And I hope you all have a beautiful eclipse. I personally am I'm going to be waking up near totality and going into some meditation and prayer and having it be a very private kind of a thing. But the potency of that moment is real. And this whole time, right now in the eclipse window, to take time to really be with the earth, that's very Virgoan. To be in prayer, meditation, that's very Piscean. Um, to just practice kindness first with yourself, maybe to go out and to be of service in your community if you are able to do that. But I think connecting to um, the deep the mystery is a big piece of it, because honestly, with the kind of astrology we're in the middle of right now, I can talk all I want about what I'm sensing, but it's so big and it's so mysterious and it's so unprecedented that it's really for each one of us just to take the time to tune in. And what I notice is even if I just sit, like this morning, I just sat for like 10 minutes and I felt like the earth was just swallowing me in. There was such a depth of connection and a stillness and a kind of like a humming, like, okay, listen, listen, listen. There's a lot that wants to be felt and seen and presenced right now. So um, that's been my experience. So just wanting to send so much love to everyone. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I'm sending so much love.